Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President of National Cheng University, Dr. Huey Jen Su, and also Dr. Harlem Brundtland, and the Associate Vice President of Academy Affairs, Dr. Yu-Ming Wang. As they take their seats, please kindly give them your warmest applause. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin today's ceremony. Welcome to 2018 National Cheng University Honorary Doctorate Degree Conferral Ceremony for Dr. Harlem Brundtland. We will start by first presenting a video introducing today's honoree, Dr. Harlem Brundtland. Please watch the video.
Dr. Harlem Brundtland was awarded the Tom Prize in 2014 for her lifetime achievement in sustainable development. Dr. Brundtland served as the first female Prime Minister of Norway for 10 years. In 1983, she was appointed by the United Nations to chair the World Commission on Environment and Development. And from 1998 to 2003, she was the Director General of the World Health Organization. Dr. Brundtland was born in Oslo in 1963. Dr. Brundtland graduated with a medical degree from the University of Oslo and acquired a master's degree in public health from Harvard University in 1965. She started her political career as Norwegian Minister for Environmental Affairs in 1974, then became Deputy Leader and Leader of the Labour Party. Beginning in 1981, she served as the first female Prime Minister of Norway. Dr. Brundtland is known as Mor Gru, the Mother of Norway. The Brundtland Report, Our Common Future, was published in 1987 to define sustainable development in a global context. Her vision still inspires us today.
I was very much aware that unless we find a response to these challenges that can combine environmental concerns with economic development and overcoming of poverty, there is no way. Because no country, no people will accept to stay in poverty because people in other parts of the world are feeling the consequences to the environment.
Dr. Brundtland is committed to promoting science education and career development for female researchers. She has donated 5 million NT dollars, a portion of her Tom Prize Award, as a grant for the 2016 to 2018 Brundtland Week of Women in Sustainable Development. NCKU is proud to be delegated as the official organizer.
Dr. Brundtland 自己的理想，想强调两个方面，一个是属于能够促进女性科学家，特别是女性科学家在永续发展、公共卫生领域的一种提升或者一些机会的链接所以我们尽量能够跨领域的，让比较属于开发中，尤其是在永续发展议题当中非常非常重要的，或者是特别有强烈影响的一个区域来参加所以我们希望这些科学家到了台湾以后，能够看到台湾各个不同的区域所展现出来的一些挑战。
Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. As the godmother of sustainable development, Dr. Brundtland looks forward to seeing future generations continue to learn and push for more changes.
I personally have done what I can to spread the message over the last 40 years. And now, you know, I will continue as long as I'm alive, but I'm counting on you, the young people, to really run with the torch.
Now, we will welcome President Su, Dr. Brundtland, and the Associate Vice President of Academy Affairs, Dr. Wang, to come onto the stage. Please give a round of applause for them. Next, President Huey Jen Su will give our opening remarks. Please welcome President Su.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on this auspicious occasion, I have the immense privilege to welcome the newest honorary doctoral degree recipient of the National Cheng University, Madame Harlem Brundtland. Having received a medical degree and later a Master of Public Health from the Harvard University in 1960s, Madame Brundtland was heavily influenced by her father, who was a physician specialized in rehabilitation medicine. Also, a very prominent member of the nation's Labor Party, which made the young girl at age 7 also a member of the party's children's organization. Dr. Brundtland once recalls that there were always political and intellectual challenges at home, and she was encouraged to believe that women can achieve the same thing in the world as men. She later became the youngest ever and first female prime minister in Norway for 3 terms, having previously already served as a Minister of Environment and a Parliament member. Upon the request by the Secretary General, Dr. Brundtland established and chaired the World Commission on Environment and Development, where the term of sustainable development was first coined and defined as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Today, the history-making watershed concept remains to challenge the global community whether we are able to derive a better balance of economic development, environmental integrity, and social equity. Through her remarkable career, health has been always a deeply personal, professional, and political dimension of the Brundtland's life. In 1998, she became the first female Director General of the United Nations World Health Organization. Under her leadership, the WHO addressed effectively global pandemics such as AIDS, SARS, and even the health risk associated with the changing environment. She once said that there is a very close connection between being a doctor and a politician. The doctor tries to prevent illnesses. They try to treat it, it comes. That's exactly the same as what you try to do as a politician with regard to society. She certainly has enriched the global health by taking the health into the halls of power and influence for more meaningfully than anyone in our time. Dr. Brundtland is married to Mr. Alan Brundtland, an expert on international relations and a foremost member of Norway's Conservative Party, the opposition to Labour's party. He said in an interview with Time, "My field is analysis of international relations. Her field is doing international relations. That makes for very good morning seminars." Dr. Brundtland was awarded with the first Town Prize in Sustainable Development in 2014 for her innovation, leadership, and implementation of sustainable development that laid out the scientific and technical challenges for the global community to achieve a better balance of economic development, environmental integrity, and social equity for the benefit of all humanity. She donated part of the Town Prize Awards to promote the issues of sustainable development and public health. The Brundtland Week of Women in Sustainable Development was made possible by her generosity aiming to enhance the involvement of younger women researchers from developing countries in the issues of sustainable development and public health, and to build a network to support system among female scientists from different countries. In addition, part of her donation went to the UN foundations to support the supplement of the stable energy to more than 262 medical institutes in Tanzania, a country in Eastern Africa, which resulted in a better hygiene system and made tremendous positive impact to nearly 2.3 million people. Over the past decades, Dr. Brundtland's path-taking endeavors has profoundly inspired hundreds and thousands of public health practitioners, environmental scientists, and to some extent, the politicians around the world to believe that there can always be a great calling and higher aim, regardless of the disciplines, if we bring passion and vision into each and every one of our professions. She has successfully exemplified how she envisioned her choices to become a doctor at 18 years old can achieve, and I quote, "A doctor is who wanted to heal and who wanted to change, not least to change the cause of suffering and injustice." She continues to practice and insists on evidence and on research-based decisions, which helped to build scientific attitude, credibility, and confidence within her career, across political practice, and across parties and countries. As we are all incentivized by her landmark accomplishments, we have also learned that once you are committed to lead change, the change shall come in due time. Today, joined by a panel of prominent world leaders, and as Deputy Chair of the Elders, Dr. Brundtland continues to actively embrace her lifelong commitment to support peace building, help address major causes of human sufferings, and to promote the shared interests of all humanity. As our 87-year-old NCKU formally adopts the Sustainable Development Goals as the university guiding principle for the decade to come, we cannot be more proud to think of a way to celebrate by being associated with the godmother of sustainable development through the granting of this humble doctoral degree to, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Gro Harlem Brundtland. Thank you.
Thank you, President Su. Now, Dr. Yu-Ming Wang, our Associate Vice President of Academy Affairs, Deputy of the Vice President of Academy Affairs, will deliver the recommendation for our honorary Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland.
Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, the first female Prime Minister of Norway, is currently serving as the Deputy Chair of the Elders and the Vice Chair of the United Nations Foundation Board of Directors. She received her medical degree from the University of Oslo in 1963 and obtained a Master of Public Health degree at Harvard University in 1965. Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland has held many significant international positions, including the chair of the World Commission of the Environment and Development from 1983 to 1987, during which time she drew international attention to the needs for the sustainable development. While serving as the Director General of the World Health Organization from 1998 to 2003, she focused on the promotion sustainable and fair health system in all countries of the world. Under her leadership, the WHO efficiently slowed the spread of many global infectious diseases, including AIDS, malaria, and SARS. Appointed as the United Nations Special Envoy on climate change in 2007, she assists the Secretary General in conducting the international negotiation among the government and the organization for a post-Kyoto Protocol climate change treaty. In recognition for her pioneers and the significant contribution to the global environment, healthy human rights, and the sustainable development, I therefore recommend Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland without reservation to become a distinguished recipient of the Honorary Doctorate of Medicine from the National Cheng University. Minda Lai, Vice President from Academic Affairs, National Cheng University, April 3, 2018.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. Now, President Su will accept the recommendation and announce the official response of the university.
On behalf of the National Cheng University and in accordance with the degree conferral law, I sincerely accept the recommendation by the Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Minda Lai, to bestow upon Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland in Honorary Doctorate of Medicine. Huey Jen Su, President, National Cheng University, April 3, 2018.
Next, President Su will turn the tassel for Dr. Brundtland and award the honorary doctorate degree certificate. Dr. Brundtland, please kindly come forward. Thank you, Dr. Brundtland and President Su. Now, let's have a short break. We will start in 5 minutes to continue our plenary lecture.
好，对不起各位，因为那个Dr. Brundtland 对这些温度啊调节比较敏感，所以呢，他想说他把他的袍子放下来。She's going to take off the gown because it's way too much heat and weight for her. So it's going to be just a few minutes for us all， 好不好？有2分钟，他就回来做他的演讲，这样。好，谢谢。
Now, Dr. Guru Harlem Brundtland will give her plenary lecture. We will have President Su chair this session. Please welcome President Su and Dr. Brundtland again. Please kindly give them your warmest applause.
So, girl, you have either options: either stick to the microphone or have the handheld microphone.
No, I don't want a hand.
Okay, so this is around, so you can adjust it. Okay, good.
You're the same height as me. Eh?
You are.
We are. Yeah,
This
is
all right?
good, huh? Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Madam Brundtland.
Thank you. This is good.
Yeah. It looks fine to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Madam President, Vice President, Mr. Jesse Cheng, this is, for me, that's his name. I'm not sure it's correctly said, but from the Tang Prize. Ladies and gentlemen, students and faculty, it is great to be back here today in Taiwan and also here, remembering the wonderful events in 2014 when the first Tang Prizes were awarded. I was deeply grateful to be receiving this great honor. One of the positive developments was the Tang Prize grants that we could use for each one of us to further our key causes. The Grow Brundtland Week was one of these initiatives that we have heard of now, inspired by my conviction that to promote women and their role in society is a crucial element of a sustainable world of prosperity, peace, and security. The world has fortunately, step by step, moved forward, inspired by my conviction, over my lifetime, to realize that human rights also need to be women's rights, and that empowerment of women is a prerequisite for sustainable development. I'm grateful for the excellent efforts also by the National Cheng University and the quality of the process of assembling young women scientists who wish to contribute to the global knowledge base for pursuing sustainable development. The title of my speech today is about the critical need we all are facing for our world and our more than 190 different countries to be working together for our shared interests to safeguard our common future. Sustainable development, the concept we coined back in 1987, has nearly 30 years later, in 2015, led to a crucial global agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals. It has been a long journey, but it has successfully brought the world together behind key common goals. It is also an important part of my own life story and how I became personally involved engaged and convinced already as a young environment minister of Norway in pursuing a pattern of development that could benefit all, protect our planet, and promote peace. In 2015 became a year of historic breakthrough as our leaders finally agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals in New York, and that was in September, and then in December that year on the Global Agreement on the Climate in Paris. So 2015 fulfilled the hopes of so many and became the breakthrough year for a critical agenda for our world and our future, only less than a year after the first tank crisis. I had become greatly inspired at the UN in New York, having spoken at a session led by the French President Hollande at the historic meeting when world leaders signed up to the new Global Sustainable Development Goals. It was really uplifting for me to witness the passion and the determination only weeks before Paris shown by the leader of the host country, France. I am convinced, however, that we would not have seen the success of Paris without the hard work for years towards the Sustainable Development Goals. An initiative taken by the UN Secretary General after the breakdown in Copenhagen in 2009. This again inspired the result of Rio +20 in 2012. It all led to a broad global effort to agree on sustainable development goals for rich and poor countries alike. For the first time, a development agenda now fully integrates the environment and applies to all countries, not just to the developing world. And so does the Paris Agreement, finally. Sustainable energy for all, empowerment of women, addressing inequality and good governance, also within countries, are certainly concerns and obligations that also rich countries need to take seriously. After a hard-fought struggle, the goals did include, as goal number 13, a crucial, strong commitment by all countries seriously to address climate change. That is what was demonstrated and confirmed in Paris. It had taken a quarter-century of negotiations to reach this stage of common responsibility, based on national commitments and agreed principles and rules on common goals and aspirations, to be reporting and to be counted, and to increase the level of ambitions at regular intervals. The long journey of follow-up to the work of our Commission in 1987 has a broad range of efforts by so many countries, institutions, individuals, and leaders behind it. I will share with you some critical parts of that story. In 2015, we also celebrated the 70th anniversary of the United Nations. When the United Nations was established in 1945, I was 6 years old. The world was emerging from the horrors of the Second World War. In my country, Norway, we were reasserting and reestablishing democracy after 5 long years of Nazi occupation. By the time I was 10, my family was living in New York, and I was proud and keenly aware that a fellow Norwegian, Trygve Lie, had become the United Nations' first Secretary General. Little did I know then that I would have a long-time involvement with the United Nations. Over the past 35 years, I have had the honor and privilege to serve on various United Nations committees, as well as heading up one of its flagship agencies, the World Health Organization. However, today, more than ever, the relevance of the United Nations is also challenged. There have been profound shifts of power and wealth in the world since the UN was established. Of the 193 member states of the United Nations today, nearly 3/4 were not members in 1945. Its purpose now is greater than just trying to maintain peace and security among nations. It is also to help solve the economic, social, humanitarian, and environmental problems facing us. My first role serving the UN was in 1983, when the UN Secretary General invited me to establish and chair the World Commission on Environment and Development. Our commission considered the interwoven challenges of environmental degradation, poverty, and population growth. The Commission, best known for developing the broad political concept of sustainable development, published its report, Our Common Future, in April 1987. The Commission's groundbreaking and radical recommendations led to the Earth Summit, the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. The whole process of our work was from the outset geared towards a broad international learning process, reaching out to all relevant parties, not only governments and the NGO community, but to universities and think tanks, research bodies, and not least to the whole business community. We knew we would be in this together, but that the future depended on unparalleled cooperation to succeed. In Rio '92, impressive results were already possible to be achieved. The Climate Convention, the Biodiversity Convention, and of course Agenda 21, describing the development needs of the coming century. 5 years later, we had the Kyoto Protocol on Climate, leading to seemingly endless rounds of negotiations, up to the historic meeting in Copenhagen in 2009. There it became clear that new ways of collaboration were of the essence after the serious breakdown between different groups of countries that dominated that important summit. However, at least one common goal was agreed. The world must not see a higher temperature rise than 2 degrees Celsius, an essential outcome of Copenhagen after all. Parallel to the climate focus, over the years, the UN system continued working on several critical issues for our common future. The Social Summit in Copenhagen in the 90s, in Cairo, the Conference on Population and Family Planning, in Beijing, the Conference on Women's Rights, just to mention 3 of maybe the most critical ones. At the millennium, our world leaders were able to agree on a number of crucial issues and launched the Millennium Development Goals. This was a key effort to follow up Agenda 21, but it turned out it was impossible to take into account the serious climate and environment dimension we were already facing. Also, the idea that a development program should address all countries, not just the developing world, was still unthinkable. We have come a long way since the publication of the report nearly 30 years ago. Indeed, great strides have been fought since the launch of the Millennium Development Goals in 2000. We have dramatically reduced the proportion of people living in extreme poverty. More people have access to safe drinking water. Fewer children are dying in infancy. Fewer mothers die due to giving birth to new generations. However, even a quick glance will show that while some in the world are experiencing unprecedented levels of prosperity, the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. Environmental degradation continues, and the effects of climate change have begun to threaten the world's most vulnerable populations and ecosystems. This is why the new Sustainable Development Goals will be crucial in continuing the momentum to eradicate extreme poverty by 2030 and to address a number of critical economic, social, and environmental issues, including climate change. Over the last 28 years, since the launch of our common future, I have often been asked to confirm that so little is being done, that the challenges are too large to tackle, basically being confronted with the issue of giving up. Yes, it has taken too much time. Yes, the pace of change has often been devastatingly slow. However, I have always tried to remain focused on the urgent goals and counting even small gains in wisdom and commitment. So today, I believe it is time to also turn it all around. We should celebrate while reminding people that looked at historically, it may not be so surprising that close to 200 countries with widely varying stages of development, culture, and history have needed some time to overcome such large differences in background and perspective. When I was asked to chair the World Commission on Environment and Development in 1983, I was leader of the opposition and had my hands more than full with my responsibilities on the Norwegian political scene. The Secretary General put upon me a heavy feeling of responsibility when he explained, "You are the only environment minister to have become Prime Minister." I just could not decline. Years later, now for the third time Prime Minister, during question hour in the Norwegian Parliament, I became exasperated. After a long round of questions from an opposition leader who insisted I must tell him which single factor was the really essential one, I concluded, everything is linked to everything else. I was immediately attacked and criticized by the press for being so unclear and so evasive. Interestingly, as awareness and global debates have increased, the understanding of the multiple and complex challenges we are facing, my remarks back then are now often referred to and quoted as an example of the deepest wisdom. In 2015, after nearly 3 decades, countries of the world have in fact been able to overcome often very deep differences of opinion and priorities. These deep divisions over the new threats to the global environment came fully to the fore already in Stockholm, more than 40 years ago at the first major UN conference on the environment. Indira Gandhi, the most forceful voice from the developing nations then, said the famous words, "Poverty is the greatest polluter." When I was appointed a decade later to lead what was later to be called the Brundtland Commission, I was profoundly aware that there was no alternative road ahead but to confront the two challenges, environment and development, in an integrated manner. This is why the Commission also was named by us the way it is. Clearly, a key concern for human development must be eradication of abject poverty and meeting the needs and rights of every human being for dignity, real choices, and a decent life. On the commission I put together with more than half of the members coming from the developing world, something I insisted on and that had not happened in global context before. We analyzed these basic links as well as raised the new dimension of intergenerational responsibility. Never before had humanity been faced with having to extend their moral responsibility, concern, and obligations to all future generations, not just the ones living now. In our report, we called for radical change and transformation. We pointed at the need for equitable growth, one that is forceful and at the same time socially and environmentally sustainable. Crucially, I believe, it was that we did not ask for zero growth. There was something before us called the Club of Rome that called for zero growth, an impossible concept. What really matters is the quality of growth, both in terms of promoting growth that benefits the poor, but also in terms of reducing the impact on the environment. We address the dangerous trends towards climate change and global warming as a major challenge to the international community and to our common future. This was, in fact, dramatic enough for the world to be able to agree only 5 years later in Rio on the Climate Convention. The type of policy changes that are needed enter directly into the core of our development patterns and the use of energy. The fact is that many countries have been much too reluctant to commit to change, especially the largest emitters of greenhouse gases. Over the last 20-25 years, the reality that the effects of climate change is so much harder hitting poor people has increasingly become a key part of the discussion. Ecosystem losses due to climate change are constraining livelihood opportunities, especially for poor people. Growth patterns, both in Africa and China, still see the poor falling further behind. Many leaders now realize this can also be a source of social instability. Poor countries and emerging economies are already responsible for 2/3 of global emissions, a proportion that will increase year by year. So we all need to recognize that the drivers of that challenge include unsustainable lifestyles, production and consumption patterns, and the impact of population growth. As the global population grows from over 7 billion to 9 billion in 2040, with the emergence of 3 billion new middle-class consumers over the next 20 years, the demand for resources will rise exponentially. By 2030, the world will need at least 50% more water, 45% more food and energy, and 30% more water. It has now become clear that how closely linked climate change is with the Sustainable Development Challenge. Negative effects through climate change are illustrated by their impact on food security, on water scarcity, poverty and livelihoods, health and the well-being of oceans and other ecosystems. It gives me new hope today that there is a greater appreciation and concern about the increasing gaps within and between countries. To bring all countries and populations into an era of sustainable development and progress while protecting planet Earth, only a broad and consistent approach to overcome poverty and secure dignity, human rights, health and education for all is a viable and acceptable alternative. We have seen considerable progress in the Human Development Index in countries across the world. However, it will not be desirable or sustainable if these improved averages are accompanied by rising inequalities in income and unsustainable patterns of consumption. A recent report from Oxfam reminds us of the dimension of this drama. The richest 1% of us is now as wealthy as the remaining 99%. Terrible, shocking numbers. I believe we now need to put inequality at the heart of the agenda. Inequality is a barrier to human development in the first place, and greater equity is a condition for reaching the goal of eradication of abject poverty and deprivation. So investing in people's capacities, capabilities, women as well as men, through health, education, job creation, and other social services must be an integral part of sustainable development. We can no longer assume that our collective actions will not trigger tipping points as environmental thresholds are breached, risking irreversible damage to both ecosystems and human communities. We all need to recognize that the drivers of that challenge include unsustainable lifestyles, production and consumption patterns, and the impact of population growth. As the global population grows, as I mentioned, there will be all of these added water and food and energy needs that I mentioned. So our panel strongly emphasized a critical point for our common future, the need to always measure and to price what matters. The marketplace has to reflect the full ecological and human costs of economic decisions and establish price signals that make transparent the consequences of both action and inaction. So we spoke about this yesterday at the Academia Sinica. You know, pollution, including carbon emissions, can no longer be free. Subsidies should be made transparent and phase out for fossil fuels by 2020, and we must make new ways to measure development beyond the GDP. You know, ironically, some of these words that a panel in front of Rio 2012 we made are word-for-word recommendations we made already in 1987 in the Brundtland report. Also then we pointed to the need for science to allow for a more informed and integrated decision-making. This is essential for decision makers to share the basic knowledge upon which to act. Most countries have by now experienced the dramatic changes in their own environment and are finally opting for cooperation instead of conflict and denial. It has become clear how closely linked climate change is with the Sustainable Development Challenge. Negative effects are illustrated by their impacts, and we all know now that water, food, and energy are all essential components as we promote sustainable development. They clearly also have a human rights perspective and are basic for health and abating poverty. And women are now increasingly being acknowledged as a vital force for growth and for sustainable development. Countries and companies with higher levels of gender equality have faster growth and better performance. We have the knowledge, the data, and the experience to prove that this is the case, and that those who remain stuck in patriarchal patterns of economic life will lose, and lose badly. Leadership, first and foremost among key global players, is of the essence. And I think we all know, certainly we know in Norway and in Taiwan, nothing moves fast enough or strongly enough if the USA is not one of the driving forces. It is also true very little happens of any consequence if China, India, and other important emerging economies do not engage for results. Fortunately, there are several good signs of large and emerging economies like China's taking important action to promote public health, a cleaner use of energy, and efforts to reduce dangerous emission. Now, the world took note when US and China, together responsible for half of global emissions, announced their commitment to take action and be part of the global solution. It did make it much less attractive also for reluctant countries to choose to line up behind one or both of those two major players as an excuse for their own inaction. Now, I think we all know that financing will be a critical issue. Limited public funds must be used strategically as incentives to unlock greater private investment flows, share risks, and expand access to the building blocks of prosperity, including modern energy services. And governments are taking action. Many are preparing for pricing carbon. Together they represent almost half of the global warming types of emissions. This means taking advantage of the vast potential that lies in maximization of resource productivity, especially with respect to energy and to water, and reducing waste. It means investing in sustainable technologies that will create jobs and support the poor, improve health and education, and build more resilient and equitable societies. And clearly, the private sector must fully engage and be fully responsible. The traditional separation between the public and the private sector is becoming increasingly irrelevant as our societies realize how interdependent we all are in a world with mounting common challenges and threats. Not just the public and the voluntary sectors, but also the business community must be socially and globally responsible. But business now needs, and they call for, much more government action to inspire innovation and solutions to reach a sustainable world. I have seen over all those 30 to 40 years how the business community was only pointing to governments, not willing to do anything themselves. That has changed. This also means we must urgently turn around the widespread and paradoxical policies still rampant across the world. Subsidies for fossil fuels, you don't have them here, do you? Well, maybe you do. That give additional incentives for their use. A policy that goes in the opposite direction of what we need. In fact, annual subsidies for established fossil fuels are estimated to cost about $500 billion, depending on the oil price. India is today using 14% of its federal budget for subsidies of gasoline prices, $43 billion. These are resources which could be channeled to clean, low-cost, sustainable energy technologies, as well as to social programs to benefit the poor. It is hard to believe that 16 years into the 21st century, exposure to indoor air pollution from the use of wood, dung, and coal for cooking and home heating is still one of the world's biggest public health problems. Yet 2.7 billion people still use these fuels, and more than 1 billion have no access to electricity. Globally, the good news is that the production and deployment of renewable energy is gaining much speed. Asia's energy needs will double over the next 20 years. This certainly illustrates the fundamental need to decouple this new era of growth from growth in CO2 emissions, while ensuring universal access to sustainable energy. Many governments are, as I said, preparing for pricing carbon, and together that means more than around half of the emissions. And also business has increasingly become aware that carbon pricing is the most efficient and most cost-effective means of reducing emissions, leading the business community to voice their support for carbon pricing. I think we all understand that partnerships will be crucial to deal with the dangers of climate change and to promote a green economy and unsustainable development. No, sorry, to avoid unsustainable development. So, in closing, and thank you all for listening, and thank you for the great honor, Madam President, of awarding me the honorary degree today. I believe we are all in this together as individuals and representatives of civil society. This scenario, this awareness that we have today, was certainly not there when I go back more than 30 years to some of my first meetings at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. I had been invited as speaker, the only woman except for Simone Veil from France. The title of my speech in 1979 was Quality of Life in the 1980s. I spoke about equality, the need to protect the environment, empowerment of women. Only after the turn of the century could we see a growing awareness among business leaders that they too are part of the equation. All I heard for years and years in Davos was this response: these are the responsibilities for governments and the public sector. We in the business community have only one goal and one responsibility: our financial bottom line. The scene has changed. All serious business leaders are now on board, realizing they too are part of the solution for a future that is prosperous, safe, and secure. So I remain optimistic. Advances in science have given us a better understanding of climate and ecosystem risks. Billions of people, even in developing countries, are socially connected by technologies that have shrunk the world and expanded the notion of a global neighborhood. So I again say, as long as we live on the same planet, there is no alternative path for us ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brundtland. Now we welcome President Su to chair the Q&A session.
This is actually not typical for a doctoral lecture on the acceptance that we have Q&A session. As you can see, there are many young generation here, as well as our 5 women scientists that receive our award this year. They're sitting right here. You can identify them. So I wonder if you kindly maybe just take a few questions on the audience.
Absolutely.
And, okay, so we really have just a very limited amount of time, and the floor is open now for any of you. If you have any questions, inquiries, comments, curiosities about Madam Brundtland's lifelong endeavor. Anyone? I'm just going to have time. Yes, good. Okay. It's very young, probably 16 years old.
Hello, madam. My name is Joanna and from Cheng Girls High School. What I want to ask is that what would be the most difficult part and the most critical problem when facing an embedded habit in a society while changing and empowering a woman? Thank you.
Speaking it slowly.
I'm sorry.
She said something about what will be the most difficult
Part
of
changing the embedded habit in society for empowering women.
Oh my goodness! How do you best empower women when you have a lot of problems inside society? Yeah. How do you overcome? Well, when I think of the experience in my own country, clearly, and I watched a film that was made just recently. There were clips from old, films taken by the Norwegian TV system. When I became Prime Minister in 1981, somebody went out on the streets and asked, what do you think about the new Prime Minister? We have a woman Prime Minister, And there were several older men above 50, 60, who answered, oh, I think a man needs to be Prime Minister. And then there were a couple of young and middle-aged women who said, oh, it's about time, But when I saw the pictures of these men in their 50s who made that response, I believe a man needs to be Prime Minister. Nobody in my country would dare even to think in those terms now. So this was 81. We are 37 years later now. And the way people think in my country has changed. But they have not changed overnight. It has taken time, taken decades, as people have grown up seeing, I was around as a Prime Minister or the opposition leader for a total of nearly 20 years. Then we had several men Prime Ministers, 3 or 4 in fact. Then in 2013, a new woman became Prime Minister in Norway. And I remember telling my mother when I was a young politician and she saw me struggling with male, negative attention. Oh, Gro, why do you do all this work? Why do you take all this criticism? Isn't it terrible and isn't it very unfair? And I told my mother, no, I have to do all these things because as society changes, attitudes have to change. I have to take all this trouble. But next time a woman becomes Prime Minister in Norway, it will be different. I said that, in the early 80s, end of the 70s, early 80s. Now I have the proof that I was right. Nobody questions the present conservative Prime Minister who is a woman, because society is already changed. People have new attitudes. Women and men behave in different ways, and the young people take it for granted. So there is hope, but you need to be pushing for the change. Women have to speak up, and the men have to listen and realize that they are in this with the women they love or the daughters they have given birth to. Yeah?
Thank you, madam.
Okay, a comment from the men. There's one. Okay, in the very back, and then we'll come back. Yeah, there. 来，最后一行，最后一个。
There was somebody behind there, yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah.
From the boys' high school.
I'm Cheng from a university student studying law, and first I want to thank you for a very good speech, and it inspired me a lot. And second, I want to ask a question about common questions. And I want to continue the last questions is that nowadays, since the society has changed, but the women still face a lot of challenges. And the biggest one is that how can women manage their personal life and family and their academy or political life or achievements at the same time? And that is my questions. How can you at the same time doing a lot of prominent achievements and as well as managing your own life and your own family?
You know, before I became Prime Minister, of course, I had been a young environment minister and a deputy leader of the Labour Party for many years. And during that time, and all through my time as Prime Minister, on our program, on my conviction and on the program of the party was changing family patterns and changing family policy to benefit equality, to benefit women's rights and the children's rights. So we were establishing pregnancy leave, which when I had my children, that pregnancy leave was 12 weeks. When my daughter had her first pregnancy, it had become 18 weeks. We had pushed it forward. And when my granddaughter had her child recently, it was 1 year because we changed this during the 80s and 90s and also included parental leave reserved for the father. So it was no longer a choice that, you know, the father could, if he wanted to, take a number of weeks. In the Norwegian system today, if the family does not let the father take part of the parental leave, then they lose that leave period. So within the year now, the father has to take 14 weeks. He can take more, but he has to take at least 14 of the 48 or 52 weeks. You know, what does this lead to? It leads to, if you are a business leader and you are going to hire a young person, it used to be 50 years ago, if you even think about hiring a young woman, you have to think, oh, that woman may next year be pregnant. So I take the man. Now, when you see a young man or young woman, you can think, oh, that man may be a father and be away for 14 weeks, you know. So you level out those challenges in this way. Secondly, you need to have quality childcare for both parents to be able to have a family and a working life. There has to be a safe and good place for children from 1 year onwards. This we have today. It has taken years, but every child at 1 year has the right to childcare in a nursery school for children from 1 year. So you have to make these changes in society. Unless you make those changes, it's not only attitudes, but also reality of the choices that people have. If public policy has not made this possible, then we will not have equality and not have a progressive, productive society. Yeah.
I think we are quite hopeful to have a young, loyal male student asking this type of questions. So,
and of course, we did use law. We did use policy decisions, law changing to make this happen. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So there comes from India, our women scientist is here, right? Go ahead.
This is one of our awardees, yeah? Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for the inspiring speech. You are a medical doctor, and I want to know that when and how you developed interest in the public health.
How
and when you developed interest in the public health.
Oh, this age, yeah? No, because I told you, you know, I had a doctor, or I think maybe you told, a doctor father and a mother that had very strong values and convictions. They were both social democrats and members of the Labour Party. My father was both a politician and a doctor. And so early on, I started believing that I should become a doctor, because then I can help change society in a better direction to create more justice and more rights for all people, and to improve society by applying the knowledge of health. You know, it was my way of thinking already when I was maybe 8 or 10 years old. And then that made me seek medical school in Oslo, and then seek directly into Harvard School of Public Health when I had finished my medical degree. Yeah.
Very much. I think we're going to have the last one, preferably from Nanyi-zhong. Good, okay. That's best boys' high school in the country. Huh? Nanyi-zhong 的来，请。
Hello, I'm Nemo from Tainan for Senior High School, and what I would like to ask is what motivates you in continuing to advocate in the issue of global climate change, because as we know, there are still many people that are skeptical of this idea of climate change, and what I want to ask is that does this make you kind of like depressed and sort of frustrated that so many people still don't believe in the actual idea of climate change actually happening?
Yeah. You know what? Because I have seen over the years that there are fewer people that question the reality of climate change now than even 5 years ago. So all those of us who have been advocating have been doing the research and the science to show what is happening and to spread the realities. We are part of the reason why more people today, also because they can see it now, you know, on the ground. Until about, I mean, we have known for sure this problem for 40 years. But the scientific evidence has grown and grown. And I think people who 10 years ago dared to question the reality of this, they were really, most of them, part of a sometimes lobby-based campaign coming from the coal industry to place fake news, you know, into the arena. And they are still doing it to a certain extent, but they are more easily now you know, you more know that where they come from. Like we did when I started WHO, I said, tobacco should no longer be advertised, glamorized, or subsidized. And the World Health Assembly audience stood up and applauded, because there had been so much resistance in the tobacco industry, effectively using economic strength to push anyone who dared to talk about the danger of cancer from tobacco. They were lying in the UN Congress, all the CEOs of the tobacco companies. You know, you've had some of the same thing from the coal industry now in later years. but look, they have silenced down. You know, the foreign minister of the US, Rex Tillerson, who left 2 days ago because he had become too wise, I think. He was the leader of Exxon, the big oil and coal company, oil company. Until about 5 years ago, he was one of those who kept financing and supporting the counter-evidence, so-called, the false spreading of, you know, fooling people. But he understood some years ago, maybe 5, 7 years ago, this is no longer the right way. So he changed and became one of the progressive business leaders that said, look, this is it. We have to be part of the solution. Yeah. So even his life and his change illustrates how at one point the best people, at least within those industries, realized they have to be working with us, all of us, in partnership to find the solutions, not stand against history. So the problems you are asking about are less now than they were even 5 years ago. The world has understood, and most people have understood, although there will always be some that are more foolish than others and who are in the back of the line. Yeah.
In the interest of time, we probably have to close out the session for the moment. But before we do that, could I please invite you all to have another round of standing applause to thank Madam Brundtland. Inspiration and the role model.
Thank you.
I believe it's not only for this generations, but also for many to come. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. How? And also, I'm going to ask you to do that. I believe all the youngsters would love to have a photo to memorize today's event with you. And the easiest way to do that is have you going back to the seat,
yes.
And we will take the photo from here. 然后我们会给一中、女中还有圣公的同学们都记这张照片，好吗 ？OK， 所以你们先坐下来，我请 Dr. Gro 回来坐下。那我们 take 这张 photo， 那之后呢，我们再请我们的院长们到台前来，我们在这里再拍一张。好 ，OK，then I have to be fast.
Thank you, Dr. Brundtland and President Su. Today, President Su brought a gift for Dr. Brundtland. Let's welcome President Su and Dr. Brundtland. 我们请第一排的贵宾上台一起合照。We will now invite the distinguished guests of the first row to come on stage for a group photo. Li Cheng. This brings us to the end of this conferral ceremony. We thank you all for joining us in celebrating this joyous and memorable occasion. Best wishes for your health and prosperity. Thank you and goodbye.